Hello, and welcome to the AB Relationships Podcast. Your hosts are Angela Lazariki, psychologist and psychotherapist, and Boris Hertzberg, psychoanalytic therapist and couples consultant. We talk about relationships and discuss some ways in which we can help each other in relating better. It is a space for sharing, discussing, and brainstorming common relationship difficulties, as well as real-life issues presented by our guests. Please note, this is not therapy, nor is it a substitute for therapy. Enjoy, as we are about to begin.
Great. Well, hello. Hello, Boris.
Hello, Angela, and hello, everybody who has joined us today.
Yes. Welcome to another podcast of AB Relationships Podcast. We hope everyone is well. How are you feeling, Boris?
Yes, I am well. And How are you?
I'm well, thank you. A heads up, I'm on the tail end of a cold, so I might, if I'm sounding a bit congested, it's because I'm nearly the end, but yeah, I think it can still be detected.
We'll take it into account. If you are sounding congested, I will be sounding in a resounding voice.
Good. So yeah, we want to balance each other out. That's it. Exactly. Teamwork.
Exactly.
Right. So in our current episode, we have discussed that we would like to focus on something that a guest of ours has mentioned in our previous episode. They came up with a phrase that kind of inspired our topic for today, which is pushing ourselves versus having fun. What that means, basically, and where we find it in our lives, and what is the balance, if there is one, and what would that balance look like?
Yes, that's an interesting subject. Let's discuss it. And if you remember, and if our audience remembers it, it came from the last episode where our guest mentioned that she comes from the culture that endorses pushing oneself as opposed to having fun. So picking up on that, I'm thinking aloud that the reasons for pushing ourselves can be various. They can be cultural, as our guest had mentioned. They can be related less to culture, but more to family, where it's part of one's family structure and family system. And they can also be individual, whereby we are pushing ourselves because there is an inner voice telling us to. So maybe we could discuss those and the difference between them.
Yes, I really like the way that you have presented our topic, Boris, because it's like three very, very strong influences in our lives, right? Obviously, our individual, preferences or our personality, our family, and then on a wider scale, the greater society in which we were brought up / live in currently. Right. So I'm wondering whether it's easier to start from the question whether, those can need to be competing approaches or whether they can be balanced out.
Yes, it's a good question, and I'm thinking, do we have a problem here in general? Maybe pushing ourselves is not a bad thing, and maybe we need to prefer it over having fun, and then we have no problem here.
Right. Yes, perhaps. I mean, it will, again, depend on the three factors that we mentioned before, right? Whether it's cultural, family, or personal. And another good question that comes up, I don't know if we're going to have time in this episode, but now it just crossed my mind, would be, what do we do when these three factors don't agree with each other and there's a clash? That would also be very interesting. I mean, my approach with most things, especially things that have to do with mental health, is the importance of nuance because I do tend to believe, and in my experience, what I have seen is that there is no one answer that fits all situations, fits all people, fits all contexts. So I really see this being applicable to our current topic as well, pushing ourselves versus having fun. I feel like for me, there is no straight up answer, and it will always depend. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to answering this.
What if we'll take some specific example and discuss when is it good to push ourselves, when it really comes in handy?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Make it specific. What would do you have an idea?
Yes, probably. I'm thinking about when we need to provide results, whether it's a deadline at work, for instance, or we, have to stand by a strict deadline, let's say with paying loans. So whenever we have some limit, either it's a time limit or some documentary limit, which officially obliges us to stand by it, it then pushes us to meet it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an external pressure, absolutely. And in the examples that you mentioned, there's also, consequences. Some of them might be less severe, some might be more severe, but there's definitely consequences, right? So that would apply more pressure, making sure in a way that we push ourselves. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to be pushed if there wouldn't be any consequences. So now my question to you then, when are we having fun?
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Because even in those examples that you mentioned, where there are clear consequences, and I'm sure most of us, if not almost everybody, can relate in one way or another, right? It's, having fun or rest, it doesn't need to be thrown out the window just because there is a deadline and or consequences. We can sort of plan how we can insert rest or enjoyment or pleasure within the whole schedule of pushing ourselves. One does not necessarily need to exclude the other, even when there are deadlines or consequences.
It makes a lot of sense, but I've been thinking about, something very rioting, that we are having fun when we have no deadlines, no schedule, no consequences. If we are able to free ourselves from the limits of consequences, the same thing that pushes us to reach something, then we are able to have fun.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot easier. It certainly is, isn't there, when we remove that external pressure? Absolutely. Absolutely. But what do we do when there is no external pressure? Which would mean, in the factors that you mentioned at the beginning, the family and society, right? Mostly. What if the pressure comes from the inside? So it's more personality based.
Okay, just as I entered myself in the situation where there are no deadlines and schedule, you are bringing them up.
I'm bringing them up again. I'm sorry. Let's stay without the schedule and the deadlines for a little bit. Give you a little bit of a fun time.
Now that's an interesting question. I think that actually underscores this balance between pushing ourselves and having fun. Because again, if we are talking about relationships, for example, our main focus, we are having fun when we are not obliged to anyone, when we are free to do whatever we want, when we are enjoying our freedom, and it brings a lot of fun and excitement in a relationship. But when we are having to deal with consequences or deadlines or some obligations, it really limits us.
Mm. Yeah, that is generally, I think, a common experience. You're absolutely right. But yet, I know of a lot of people who feel rather unhappy or lost or anxious when there is absolutely no structure, whether that is guidelines or a deadline. I know I perform a lot better when there's a deadline. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I'm happier, but it does help. So I don't know if, our listeners are going to agree with me, but to me, again, this kind of emphasizes the importance of nuance. And there is no one answer that will be the right one for each person and situation.
Yeah, it resonates with me because even in therapy, when there is no structure present, it doesn't work this well. When, for example, sessions are not limited with some time frame or with some regularity or with some structure, it just gets lost because people are often unable to take the good things out of a specific session without it being structured, without it having a clear beginning and a clear end.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
in
totally
our
agree.
work, it's actually something that we have to push ourselves to, and our clients to as well, to stand by this structure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I've interrupted you.
No, not at all. I completely agree with you. Absolutely. And because we're both therapists, right, it is our responsibility to provide that structure, because it's also providing containment, doesn't it, for our clients? I mean, when I am a client and I'm not the therapist, when it's the other way around, I always appreciated when my therapist was providing containment and some structure. Obviously, flexible structure so that, we are free to express ourselves, especially emotionally, right? Because emotion can at many times get messy and chaotic and intense.
You see, freedom, it's where having fun enters the picture.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, you're right. And how can we create that space? Well, us as therapists, right, for our clients, but in general, for the people in our lives, whether we have, we're teachers and we have students in our classroom, or whether we are, I don't know, doctors, or if we are, managers and we're kind of leading a team or managing a team of people. How can we find this balance between pushing our team or ourselves or our pupils, whatever that is, and also allowing this freedom of having fun and enjoyment, right? Which is vital, finding the space for both.
Exactly. And adding to that, I'm thinking about relationships, also creating structure in relationship. I think it's about boundaries. When we create boundaries, healthy boundaries in relationships, we can enjoy ourselves, enjoy our partner, our communication with the partner within these boundaries. But we know, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that when these boundaries are being destroyed or are not being maintained, somehow enjoyment doesn't come instead of them. It just disappears in this anxiety of people losing each other within this unspecified relationship framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a lot of room for misunderstandings. There's room, too much vagueness, and room for, misinterpreting things, assuming things, which, is always kind of rings trouble when it comes to relationships when we start assuming things. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Yeah. And if I am to kind of go back and circle to what, again, the three factors that you mentioned, I love that you mentioned those three at the very beginning. I think it was fantastic. It wasn't planned. It just kind of came out. And I thought it was fantastic the way that it came out. If we are then to go back to the personality factor, being as a person, someone who generally, pushes themselves, and they do, usually people who do that, they tend to do it in most aspects of their lives. So not just professionally, maybe they're doing it in their personal lives, or doing it, with their workout routine, or with learning, or, whatever it is. There, for me, it's even more important to be able to find that balance. And that's where, for me, kind of checking in with ourselves becomes, well, checking in with ourselves is of paramount importance anyway, for me. But that's when it becomes even more important. Asking why, what is my intention here? What is my intention when I push myself? What is my intention when I'm having fun? Because having fun can also cause issues if it's too much, or if it's kind of becomes avoidance many times, right?
Exactly, escapism, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I really like that word, escapism. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that is when it becomes like really, really important to check in. What is my intention? Why am I pushing myself? Or why am I not pushing myself?
Yes, I'm also thinking that we cannot push ourselves in a certain realm and then be totally relaxed somewhere else. It usually doesn't happen. When someone is used to pushing him or herself, they are usually behaving it in different fields of their lives. And sometimes wherever they want to relax, they usually push others. So, for example, it's a frequent situation when someone is an overachiever at work, but then he or she pushes around, their family, because they're just unable to keep this balance of on the one hand achieving things at work, on the other hand enjoying their family. So this aspect of being a pushy or overachieving brings a lot of tension in different realms of one's life.
Mm. Hmm. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's when we're talking about how we are as people, or how we tend to meet the world or to deal with situations, that tendency that we have to push ourselves or not to push ourselves will kind of spill over in various aspects of our lives. So you're absolutely right. Many times it's because we don't know how to be any other way, right? So we find ourselves kind of locked in this kind of behavior again and again and again.
I'm also thinking about the anxious personality in this respect. People who are more anxious, on the anxious side, they tend to do more because they feel anxiety that they don't do enough or they don't do the right things. So I'm thinking about this connection of anxiety and pushing oneself to the
Mm.
limits, and not only oneself but also other people around.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I'm sure you have seen it a lot with your clients. I certainly have a lot. And that is the danger, I guess, in being excessive on either side, pushing ourselves and having fun, so to speak. When we push ourselves too much constantly on all aspects of our lives, or most aspects of our lives, then it's very often what we see, that people have a burnout. Sooner or later, there is going to be a time when they won't be able to push themselves anymore, because they have been doing it so excessively, without any breaks, without any pauses, usually. So it's like a constant race. Many times it feels like a constant competition with themselves, which can inevitably, sooner or later, lead to a burnout, whatever that might look like for different people. And on the other side of the scale is kind of people who tend to kind of have fun, so to speak. But if it becomes like a constant behavior, or a constant pattern that is repeated again and again, like you said, I really like that word again. Yeah, escapism. Then again, there is the danger of feeling very lost. I have a lot of people who are feeling very lost, and there's no structure, there are no deadlines, there are no expectations, outside or inside. And many times there's this feeling of futility.
Also, the feeling of being burnt out connects to having fun as psychological defense. One is being so burnt out that they just cannot continue doing some useful things. They just resort to entertainment or to escaping, avoiding, to just not doing something that needs to be done. And so we know about the connection of depression and manic depression. That depression is on the one pole, and on the other pole is the manic side, and they coexist together. So they frequently counterbalance one another.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very often what we see, this is going away from the individual and more like communities or societies when we see many times the pendulum effect, don't we? When we tend to go from one extreme to the other before hopefully we find ourselves kind of balancing out somewhere in the center, whether that is, a belief system that a community or society holds, or whether it's like a behavior or whatever it is. It's the same with the individual, but on a grander scale, we have seen it happen time and time again with communities and societies, nations.
I agree. And since you've touched on the community subject, let's discuss what pushes us on the great society level, on the cultural level.
Yeah. What pushes us on the greater scale? The first thing that came to my mind when you said that, I don't know what that says about me, but it's like peer pressure. That's what
Peer
does
pressure.
it.
Not to be confused with beer pressure.
Exactly. Not peer pressure. That sounds like it's a bit more fun. Peer pressure,
Yes.
usually not so much fun, but it's obviously seen in so many places. Well, everywhere that you have people in communities, I suppose. Yeah. Having
So do you
those.
think
No,
do you think that peer pressure is embedded in culture, or it's something more? It has to do more on the individual level.
that's an excellent question. Well, what I have seen is that from my experience, not just as a therapist, but as a person, I don't know if you're going to agree with me. I've seen obviously there are people who are more prone, more sensitive, or I forget the word now, but yeah, they're more prone to susceptible. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry. So there are people who are more susceptible to peer pressure, and there are other people who are less susceptible. And then there's another topic for us, right? The characteristics of either two, right? But I think to a certain degree, it's inevitable. Peer pressure is inevitable because we are hardwired still as a species to live collectively, to have put an emphasis in community, whether that's a tribe or it's our classmates or it's our workmates or it's our national identity or religious identity, whatever that is. But we're very hardwired for that, right? It's also evolutionary in a way, like to belong to a group and to be accepted to that group. So peer pressure serves that, doesn't it, to a very large degree. So I think it's inevitable that it's going to be there one way or another. I don't know if you agree.
Yes, I certainly do. I'm thinking about the social pressure with which many of us are dealing. Many people want approval, especially approval on a social level, to be acclaimed, to be respected. Sorry, you disappeared. We'll re-record it. Have you lost me?
Now I found you again. Sorry. I'm sorry if it's
Okay. No, it's fine. I'll repeat then. So the this approval has to do with wanting to be socially acclaimed, or if one wants to have a status in a society and be respected. So it's I think it's a big driving force, social driving force for many people. And also when you've mentioned peer pressure, I thought about one wanting to prove something to somebody. It can also be a very strong motivating factor when a person is driven by the strong desire to prove themselves, and again to get approval from others and to prove something to themselves. And it actually can be connected also to family pressure, because I observe that family pressure brings many people to, again, to wishing to get the family's approval, positive reinforcement, and love eventually. That what drives many people in pushing themselves, in proving who they are, and wanting to earn respect from their family.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned some great examples, which are also very, very common. Very common. And they do tend to kind of fluctuate depending on culture, as we have seen through studies as well, but through personal experience. But absolutely, they have such a big impact, for sure. Wow, I feel like this is such a big topic, and we've only just we haven't even scratched the surface. It's kind of like, just a like tiny little thing. But seeing how it's almost time to wrap it up, do you have any parting words?
I feel pressured into parting now. I had fun. I'm thinking about what constitutes as fun on a social and family level, and I am simultaneously answering to myself that it's probably love or something close to love. When we feel that we are being loved by others and respected, it really substitutes this fun part upon which we are able to base our fun activities. Because in order to have fun, you have to be somewhat relaxed. So, yeah, these are my final concluding fun thoughts for today.
Wow, I loved it. I completely agree. Wow, that is a beautiful way of kind of wrapping up this episode. Love it. Love it. So thank you very much for having this beautiful discussion with me, Boris.
Thank you to Angela, and thank you to everybody who has been with us today.
Mm-hmm.
And also thank you for our guest who inspired this conversation, this exchange between us.
Absolutely. Yes. It's great to get inspiration from other people, especially like guests who come and they anyway are guests in our episode. So they're offering their time and their stories, but they also inspire more episodes. So very grateful for that. I would love to hear people's comments or read more like people's comments. So if anybody has anything to add, their take on pushing ourselves versus having fun, I would be super interested to hear that or read it.
Please let us know, are you more on the side of pushing yourself or being pushed, or more on the side of having fun and making others have fun?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And have a beautiful day, Boris, and we are going to see you in the next episode.
That's sure, and have fun.
Yes, thank you.
Bye then, see you.
Bye-bye.
You were listening to the AB Relationships Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and subscribe to be notified of the new episodes. If you would like to become our next guest, please leave your details in the form in the description. If you have any questions or would like to talk to the hosts, please also refer to the description.